Hey, what's up, Dev Crew? Today we're going to go over some of the best ways to learn how to code, whether you're a self-taught web developer or you've been learning since ASCII. It doesn't matter. And we're going to go over some anti-patterns for learning how to code as well. Many of these are scientifically proven or have some research behind them, so I'm really excited to show them to you. I just wanted to introduce myself if you haven't met me before. My name's Tyler Lemke, and I'm a full-stack web developer. I've been programming professionally for a few years now, and I know what it means to learn how to code. I've had to do a lot of learning in my time, and the whole reason that I'm making this video is because our most precious asset is time. So leveling up your career and trying to get a new job or trying to get that next raise can mean having to focus on things outside of programming. Now, I've tried most, if not all, these techniques, and I do believe that they'll work. Now, I'm gonna put links below to specific techniques if you want to jump to those techniques, as well as some other links that kind of back up the research behind many of these techniques. So I'm gonna put those links to some books and other courses below, as well as some other videos that might help you to learn how to learn better. All right, so summaries are basically making a brief statement or account of the main points of something, as you can see here on this definition. But by summarizing, I mean just taking any point or concept that you just learned and putting it into your own words. So this can be an actual summary, so where you're taking a big concept like what is Angular and putting it into your own words, or a smaller concept like what is a variable. What this does is this actually helps your brain to remember better, and it works in tandem with number two. Now, number two is called spaced repetition or spaced practice, where you actually quiz yourself or try to recall the information that you previously remembered. We're going to go over a good tool right here in a second that helps you with that spaced recall. But before that, I want to share a quick story from Make It Stick. So in this book, Make It Stick, they talk about a school that allowed these researchers to perform a test on their students. And they were a little bit skeptical about doing this test. But the long and short of it was they had a quiz at the beginning and end of class that only took a few minutes that was actually a recall quiz. And inside of this quiz, they actually put in just basic facts recall as well, which is not really recall, but it's just rereading a fact. So for the example they used in the book was the Nile River is located in Egypt. So they just had these facts as well as actual recall where a missing word would be there or some other type of quiz where you'd actually have to recall the information. Now what happened was amazing. The information that was just repeated, like the Nile River is located in Egypt, that information they didn't score any better on. But for the rest of the information, they all scored markedly better on. And if I remember right, the entire school got a higher grade average for that particular class because of this spaced repetition. Now that means that you can have a potentially 20% increase in your productivity by using just a few more minutes each day and doing spaced repetition or spaced practice. All right, let's go into the Anki tool here and see how it allows you to do this spaced repetition. Now Anki allows you to create or add these cards. And I can add a brand new card to JavaScript, for example, my JavaScript deck. And you have these different decks, and they kind of represent, just like you were to have a bunch of flashcards, it's kind of a virtual deck of flashcards. So on the front and back, you can put different things. So for example, I might put on here, how do you create a function? Right? And inside here, I might say a function name, parameters, and then block, and then code, right? This is an example of something that I have to recall. I'm summarizing, this is what a function looks like, and I'm summarizing it in a question form, and I have an answer there. So by using summary to create my card, I can actually use this to go and recall at a later date. So once I go and add that card, I can come back to my decks here and I can go to them and I can go study it, and it says, what is the difference between a variable that is null, undefined, or undeclared? And I can now try to recall that and trying to remember. So a null is a variable that just doesn't have a value. Undefined is a variable that was never initialized, and undeclared is a variable that never had a value assigned to it. So undeclared doesn't exist, undefined is not set in any way, and null is a nothing or falsy value, and I got this from a particular website. I probably said some of those wrong, but you can see right there, I was trying to recall it in my brain, and this actually solidifies the pathways in your brain. And like I said before, there's a lot of research behind this, so this is a very, very valuable technique. So I recommend that you get this tool and use it as soon as possible. So my third technique is to code daily. This is right up the alley of doing spaced repetition and recall, because when you code every day, you have to remember the things that you're coding, right? So in the flashcards we were using earlier, a lot of those, if you're doing them, you're not coding at the same time. But if you code every day, you're having to recall that information. And the other thing with the flashcards as well that I kind of missed was that even better, if you can sit down at a computer and type out what you're doing with the flashcards, like type out what the answers are, that could help you as well with coding. So what tool can you use to code daily? CodeSignal is a great one. And the reason that I recommend it is because it has a bunch of different cool tasks you can do. You can actually do a daily challenge over here like this. You can go head to head with other developers and kind of try to outwit them. And you can do algorithmic tests every day. So what's really cool about this tool is it lets you focus on learning your language, because it's going to push your limits of what you know in that particular language. And the other thing is you can code for just 15-minute segments and feel like you've accomplished something for the day. So that's why I really recommend this tool. But there's tons of different things that you can do to code every day, like have side projects and other things as well. So what is number 4? As you can see behind me, it's master the basics. Well, I've heard a lot of developers say, don't waste your time on learning syntax, right? And to that, I totally disagree. I think that you need to learn the basic syntax of the language that you are learning. So I've learned a language before. I've learned Spanish, and I've also learned English. And when I was learning Spanish, I tried to master the basic grammar and the basic words that you use in those languages, like I or yo, and him, él, and her, ella, right? I mastered these basic words so that I could form sentences. So if you're asking people to basically do the equivalent of write an entire 5-page paper by creating a brand new program, and you don't know all the basic elements that actually go into that program, you're having a lot of cognitive overload to just learn how to get the words on the page. You can't even form sentences, right? So I had this happen when I was first learning JavaScript. And actually, it wasn't that long ago that I had it happen as well. I didn't remember how to even form a function, even though I'd done it several times. And so mastering the basics is a great way to actually kind of remove all this cognitive overload that you have when you're creating your programs and focus more on the actual problem you're trying to solve at hand. And so that's why I really recommend mastering the basics. And I got it from this book called The 5 Elements of Effective Thinking. I know that at least one of the writers is a math professor. And what they noticed was that the students in their classes, in their calculus classes, that didn't understand calculus were those who did not master algebra. Now, you need to master the basics, right? You need to master the syntax. You need to master for loops. You need to master all these different things so that you can get to the point so you can master those design patterns and TDD and all these other things that will make you a great developer. But mastering the basics will help you to know how to move up a level in your career and how to keep growing as a developer. And I've noticed that when I jump into brand new languages and I just try to learn as I go, I get bogged down by all of the minute details of not knowing why is this here and why is this there. And when I jump into the language and I go into a good course, like a course on Pluralsight that will help you to learn the basics, I understand what's going on better. And so when I come back to that language later, when I come back to another program, I'm like, oh, I know exactly what that does. I don't have so much cognitive overload of looking at the code and having my brain go a little bit fuzzy because everything's so new. So number 5 is the Pomodoro Technique. Now, I've tried this one before. I've had mixed results with just not being able to do it enough over time, but I think it can be a great technique, and I know a lot of people that use it. So the Pomodoro technique works like this. You put all your tasks in a checklist, and inside of that checklist, you're going to put tasks that roughly take 25 minutes each, or you basically are going to assign how many Pomodoros you think that task will take. And a Pomodoro is just a 25-minute block. Now, these blocks are concentrated. You have to focus 100% during this 25-minute segment. Once that 25-minute segment is over, you take a 5-minute break. You do this 4 times, and then you take a 20-minute break. Now, there's many ways to do this, and it's just a really good way to get in the habit of allowing yourself to take breaks and hyper-focus on the thing that you are trying to accomplish. So try it out, the Pomodoro technique. So number 6 is paired programming. Paired programming is where 2 developers are both working inside of the same editor, and only one has their hands on the keyboard and mouse at a time, and the other one is directing, and you switch off. So paired programming is very, very good when you have a more senior programmer and a less senior programmer paired together, because they balance each other nicely, and it's a great opportunity for them to teach one another. So there are some free services you can use, like Pramp or Visual Studio Code or Atom, that will let you, if you can find another mentor somewhere, go ahead and pair program with them. If you can't do that, there is one I found online, and I might put a link below to it. I don't know anything about it, but you can pay other mentors to actually peer program with you. So this is another way that you can learn how to code, because you're learning from someone who is more advanced than you, different methods and ways to code and ways to think about code, because you're both talking openly and communicating with each other about it. Number 7 is to go and look at other people coding, or go and look at their code. So for example, you can go over to Microsoft VS Code inside of GitHub and just start digging in and looking at their product JSON file here, looking how that's set up, looking at all the different issues they have open and feature requests. That's a lot. And just going into their build and just looking at all the different things that they have inside their code. It will teach you a lot about how to code as you look at the code. You can also go back in time and look at how they've changed the code, how they've added bug fixes and things like that. You can also go on Twitch and look at people code live on there. So that might be a really good way to learn how to code as well. So basically, you just want to go and interact with others and see how they code. Now, if you can't do it with pair programming, this is kind of the second best thing. Okay, number 8 is to know how many hours in the day you can focus or do what's called deliberate practice on a specific programming topic. Now, in his book, Deep Work, Cal Newport says that typically you can only do about 4 hours of deep work a day. And he cites another research study as well, where some violinists were only able to do about 3 hours of deep work a day or deliberate practice. So you need to pay attention to how much you can actually do in a day. And using that information, kind of schedule your time around it. And we'll go into another strategy as well that utilizes this approach in just a second. Let's get over to number 9. So number 9 is getting some sleep. So in the course Learning How to Learn, they teach us that our brain actually has toxins that build up over time that need to be eliminated through sleep. And those toxins actually inhibit us to think well. So when we sleep, we allow ourselves to think better and more clearly and learn better. The other benefit we get when we sleep is that it actually strengthens our neural pathways, and we actually kind of figure out things that we were learning during the day, and it strengthens those things. So if you're not sleeping a lot, you're not going to be learning very much. So make sure to get your rest. All right, so number 10 is reflection. So in the book, Make It Stick, they say that reflection is actually a very good way to improve your learning ability. So reflection is something that some people do automatically. So reflection is basically reviewing what you've done in the past and seeing what you can do better in the future. So trying to improve on what you've done. And by doing so, you actually learn better. I know I mentioned... So number 11, I don't have that many fingers, but number 11 is eliminating distractions. So this book, Deep Work, that I've already mentioned before, it is a great book. And he talks about eliminating distractions will actually help you to get more study time and practice in. So how can you do so? Well, you need to recognize what your distractions are. What are your main distractions? Are your distractions people around you? Do you need to isolate yourself and put yourself in a different situation? I actually have a video on how to get headphones that will help you to isolate yourself in the same room with other people. And I'll put a link to the card right up above so you can check that out. But do you need that, or are you your own distraction? Do you get distracted by social media? Do you get distracted by the new and bright and shiny things? Do you get distracted by Stack Overflow side pages where it mentions random stuff about board games? Well, all those things can be mitigated. Blocksight is an extension you can use on Chrome to block specific websites during times of day or just completely. And you can use Blocksight on Android to block sites and apps as well. So check it out. So number 12 is to learn how to focus. So in Deep Work, Cal Newport talks about a specific memory champion in Australia who actually has ADD. And he says that research showed that focus is actually the primary reason that people are able to memorize things. So he recommends in the book that you learn how to memorize an entire deck of cards using something like a memory palace technique. So learn how to focus and build your focus. And the more that you can focus, the more that you can actually get deep into a subject. It actually takes around 45 minutes to actually reconstruct your thoughts if you get distracted. So being able to focus and eliminate distractions will actually help you quite a bit when you're programming and learning how to program. Okay, so the next one is actually time blocking. So in Deep Work, he talks about different ways that you can do your deliberate practice or deep work during specific times of the day, or just random times, or just going off and secluding yourself from the world and doing your deep practice there. I actually recommend that you try out the rhythmic approach, I think it's called. But anyway, it's where you actually do it a set time every day. So you block off your learning time, and that's when you are focused 100%. And I'm trying to block off that time from 4 to 8 a.m. in the morning as that specific time. So you need to find out what times a day you will be least distracted and have the most amount of willpower and energy to actually go ahead and block off this time. When you time block, you have to focus on that time because you're not going to allow yourself to do work outside of that time block period. So you only have that specific time. So there's no messing around here. There's no wasting time. You're going to get everything done during that specific time block. So the next one is interleaving. So interleaving is where you try to mix up your practice or studying by studying different topics at a time. So in the book, Make It Stick, it actually talks about how the more difficult that your learning is, as long as it's the right type of difficulty, the more that your brain will learn and make those connections. So by interleaving, you could mix in learning JavaScript with learning SQL, or doing your repetitive practice of SQL versus JavaScript and jumping back and forth between those after a small increment of time. And this is opposite to another way of learning that we'll learn at the end called mass study. But interleaving is basically a process where students mix or interleave multiple subjects or topics while they study in order to improve their learning. Block practice, on the other hand, involves studying one topic very thoroughly before moving on to another. And block practice being that mass practice that we'll talk about in the future. So just know that if it's difficult to learn, then you might be doing it the right way. What's funny is they learned that people that actually learn in the difficult way, that either do the spaced repetition and or interleaving, they thought that doing the mass study was actually more effective, even though it wasn't. So this is a really counterintuitive one to do because you won't feel like you're as productive, just like with doing the spaced repetition one. So my next technique is actually teaching other people to do. I actually came across this really cool article on Wikipedia that it's called Plastic Platypus Learning, where you actually take some inanimate object and you teach to it. And in software engineering, this technique is called rubber duck debugging. When you step through a problem and you talk about it to a rubber duck or just to an inanimate object and go, hey, this is how I'm stepping through my problem, it can actually help you to do better as you're debugging and when you're trying to explain what the code does. So try that out. Try to teach other people. How can you teach other people though? You can use this technique. You could also go on YouTube like I'm doing and go and make tutorials. You could do blogs. You could do podcasts. You can do a bunch of different ways to try to teach. You can go give speeches. There are a lot of different ways that I try to teach others about what I do. You can go teach your friends how to code, or there's a lot of different things that you can do to go and teach, but just go and teach now. But just know that if you go and teach, it helps solidify what you're learning because you have to actually understand those concepts and re-explain them to another person. So number 16 is using different types of media to try to solidify your learning. Now, this isn't a unique concept. I've heard it from a few different people, but just taking all the different types of learning methods that you can and trying to learn from them. So let's say that you're reading in a book and you're not really getting the concept of closure in JavaScript. So you go over to something like Khan Academy. I don't know if Khan Academy has this, but there are different courses inside of here for different things like computer programming, right? So you can go in here and start learning about JavaScript and things like that. This is one way that you can change up how you're learning. Another way is by listening to podcasts. So when you have some passive time during the day, so when you're on your commute or things like that, you could listen to podcasts and you can have a concept explained while you're listening to it, and then go and during the day, try to go and figure out that concept as you code. So I really like Coding Blocks. It's my favorite podcast. And Syntax is also a great one if you are a web developer. So go out and try different things. Try YouTube, try Pluralsight, try a bunch of different ways and methods of learning, and try different resources until you actually master that specific topic that you're trying to learn. All right, so we come to the anti-patterns, or things that we should avoid. And one of them is cramming or mass study. And this is when you learn a topic all at once and try to cram it all at once, or you try and repeat something over and over again, like writing out functions over and over and over again to try to learn that function syntax, where it becomes easy. And Make It Stick explains that you're actually using your short-term memory when you do this. And because you're using your short-term memory, it's not getting stuck in your brain in your long-term memory. So it's really an anti-pattern. You should not do this. You should use the spaced repetition or spaced recall approach and interleaving to help you to learn better. All right, so the next one is rereading. As you can see, the topic of this, rereading is inefficient. Inside the Make It Stick book, as well as Learning How to Learn course, you learn that rereading is not very useful. We learned that earlier when I explained that story about how they reread those particular statements of fact, and they didn't do any better on the test when they came to take those tests at that school. So rereading really gives you a negligible benefit, and it takes a lot of time. Even worse, inside of Learning How to Learn, they actually tell you that familiarity will actually make you think you're learning something when you're not. So it's really not a good strategy to use to learn effectively. All right, so number 19 is using bad resources like bad programming books or bad video courses or bad whatever, bad mentors, bad instructors. Using bad resources to go and learn. Now, your time is super valuable. So don't just use free resources if they're free, because your time is not free. So use the best resources that are available to you. Some of those resources are free, like You Don't Know JavaScript is a great resource for learning JavaScript, and it is free on the internet. So I'm not saying that free resources are bad, but you want to use the best resources out there. So how can you find what the best resources are? So you can look up reviews, you can look up videos like mine, and see that people that have reviewed actual books or courses and things like that. I actually recommend checking out Pluralsight. Pluralsight is a great place to get up and going on different topics. But I'll put a link below to them, and you can learn about almost any programming topic in Pluralsight. And you're getting taught by developers. I think the average programming years for the developers on Pluralsight is 15 years. So this stuff is like peer reviewed and everything, and a lot of the courses are really good, and you can see which ones have the most stars and go after those ones. So I really recommend using Pluralsight. There's other great resources all out there. There's free ones, there's free code camp and things like that. All right, so 20 is applying what you learn. Now you can learn all day long. You can listen to every book. You can listen to every conference talk. You can watch you can watch every video. You can read every book, technical reference book out there. But unless you go sit down and actually code, you're not going to be learning very well. Now, there's a good quote from Kyle Simpson's that the best way to learn how to code is to code. But you do have to learn and read things while you code. You can't just code without any background knowledge, right? So a lot of these strategies and topics actually revolve around, picking up that metadata or that information that you need to actually go implement the code. So the worst thing you can do is not actually code. And it's an easy trap to fall into. And it's one that you have to get out of as soon as possible. And coding daily and actually having a project that you're working on will help you with that. All right, the last one is getting stuck. So, and this other anti-pattern is if you just get stuck on a particular topic and you feel like your brain is overwhelmed, it feels like mush, and you're not getting anywhere, you actually need to take a break. So this kind of goes back to the Pomodoro Technique, where you should take breaks every so often to give your brain a rest. There's also something in the Learning How to Learn course that tells you that there's a focus and diffuse mode with learning. And when you actually take a break and you don't focus on anything in particular, let's say you go on a walk or play a mindless game, it actually allows your brain to go into what's called diffuse mode, where it might actually connect some dots inside of your head and help you to understand or have a eureka moment for something that you've been focusing on for a very long time, like a particular problem. So usually a focused study mode is better if you're learning things, but sometimes you need to just take a break. So make sure to take breaks early and often as you're coding. So those were the 21 different learning strategies. If you like this video, please share it with your friends and make sure to subscribe if you want more content like this. I love to put out videos like this that help you with your dev career. So hit subscribe and the notification bell, and we will see you in the next one.